Hello, my name is Valerie van Heest. I sure wish we could be together in person tonight. But a little bit about me. I'm a maritime historian, underwater explorer, the author of 7 books, and a partner in the museum exhibit design firm Lafferty Van Heest and Associates. I also serve on the board of directors of the Michigan Shipwreck Research Association, a nonprofit organization dedicated to searching for, diving, documenting, and interpreting Lake Michigan shipwrecks. We've explored dozens of shipwrecks over the years, but none more unusual and tragic than the 3 massive steel freighters that went down between Little and Big Sable Points off the west coast of Michigan. All 3 were lost on the evening of November 11, 1940, during what became known as the Armistice Day Storm. Now this year marks the 80th anniversary of the storm that claimed the lives of over 150 people, including 64 sailors. Let's consider what was going on in our country 80 years ago this month. On November 5th, Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected for an unprecedented 3rd term as president against a businessman, Wendell Willkie. Sound familiar? And the weather after that election was unseasonably warm, just as we've experienced in the days after the 2020 election. Coincidentally, this year, a cold front was predicted to hit on Veterans Day, the new name for Armistice Day. But 80 years ago, there was no such prediction, and that's why the storm was so deadly. So let's return to the beginning of what would become the Armistice Day Storm of 1940.
Dawn of a fatal day. In a 40-mile-an-hour gale, the center span weaves like a ribbon in a swinging twist that you wouldn't believe possible unless you could see it as you do now. There's an automobile caught on the heaving roadway. Back out of the danger zone, all stricken spectators are driven to safety. The lone motorist is forced to abandon the car. He has but a few minutes in which to save himself. But he saves himself by seconds. No structure of steel and concrete can stand such a strain.
The collapse of Washington's Tacoma Narrow Bridge on Thursday, November 7, 1940, marked the genesis of a storm of such violent proportions that over 150 people would be killed, including 64 sailors on Lake Michigan. On the following Monday, November 11, a day normally spent celebrating the armistice ending World War I, a tragic event took place on the Great Lakes. 4 massive steel steamers, all designed to withstand the wrath of Mother Nature, succumbed to the storm within just a few miles and a few hours of each other. They were all caught in the vortex of the Armistice Day Storm. The weather forecast for Sunday, November 10, didn't raise any concern for sailors. It had been unseasonably warm and calm that month. The West Coast storm was expected to peter out when it hit the Rocky Mountains. Dozens of freighters were in transit on Lake Michigan. At 3 o'clock that early Monday morning, the 250-foot Canadian freighter Novodak cleared South Chicago, bound for Quebec, filled with a cargo of powdered coal. Built in 1929 in England, the 11-year-old bulk carrier was under the command of veteran sailor Captain Donald Stipe, with 18 men serving under him. Noticing the barometer dropping, Stipe set a course north to hug the Michigan shore, hoping the land would provide a windbreak. Sunrise revealed no cause for concern. All through the Midwest, people awoke to 60-degree weather. Most left their coats at home and headed off to work or to watch a parade. Hundreds of duck hunters set out, looking forward to a productive day. Fishermen also took advantage of the good weather that Monday. South Haven fisherman Chris Waukede and a crew of 4 set out at dawn on the fish tug Indian for the first day of trout season. The 44-foot wooden fish tug Richard H., captained by Jack McKay and a crew of 2, followed, heading out into calm water. But all was not calm that morning in Chicago when the Midwest Weather Bureau staff arrived to begin their 12-hour day. They had worked the standard half-day on Sunday and were surprised to learn that overnight the pressure had dropped lower than ever recorded, a weather bomb. Nothing had happened like this since the White Hurricane of 1913. After toppling the Tacoma Bridge, the storm continued moving east, where it met a southern warm front and a northern cold front. When the fronts collided, they generated snow and high winds. And it looked like a blizzard was heading right up the center of Lake Michigan. The Weather Bureau began scrambling to issue storm warnings, but so many ships were already in transit. The 420-foot William B. Davock was among the biggest ships on the lake that day. Built as a bulk cargo carrier in 1906, the 34-year-old ship was designed to handle massive seas. The Davock had taken on a load of coal at Erie, Pennsylvania, destined for South Chicago. By noon on Monday, the Davock was in mid-Lake Michigan when Captain Charles Allen radioed that the ship would reach Chicago by evening with its crew of 33 people. At that moment, all hell began breaking loose in Chicago as a deadly rain and windstorm struck the city and began moving north. The temperature dropped rapidly, almost 40 degrees within a matter of minutes, turning rain to snow. Public transportation ground to a halt and many people sought temporary shelter. Those who made it home watched in fear. Roads clogged and many motorists abandoned their cars. At 1:30, the fishing tug Richard H. was sighted about 5 miles off South Haven, struggling in the building seas. The South Haven Coast Guard launched its motor lifeboat to assist the fishermen. By 2 o'clock, the storm hit Grand Haven. A half hour later, 30-foot waves struck Ludington. The Pere Marquette Railroad's car ferry fleet was caught unaware. 3 of its newest car ferries were in mid-Lake Michigan. The city of Saginaw 31 and the Pere Marquette 21 were heading in opposite directions, fighting the storm. The city of Flint 32, the largest car ferry, was the farthest offshore. Built for the railroad just 8 years earlier, the Flint could carry 32 railroad cars, but on that day, returning from Milwaukee, it carried only a few autos, 4 passengers, and 45 crewmen. As the storm sped northward, the 380-foot Canadian freighter Anna Minch sailed toward Chicago, carrying a cargo of cattle feed. The Minch was the only Great Lakes freighter named after a woman, the owner of the shipping company that had it built in 1903. There were 20 Canadian crew members on board under the command of Captain Donald Kennedy, an experienced lake captain. The ship didn't yet have radio, so Kennedy kept a watch at signal stations along the way. But the flags had not yet been raised. As the storm blanketed the Midwest, it claimed the lives of dozens of people who were unprepared for the frigid weather. Some people were killed by flying debris. Others perished due to downed power lines. Many people died in stranded cars, and the storm took the lives of dozens of duck hunters. Over 2 million Thanksgiving Day turkeys died, as well as hundreds of head of cattle. and before the day's end, the lives of so many sailors would be cut short. On Lake Michigan, the storm wreaked havoc on 300 miles of open water, causing millions of dollars in damages. The oil tanker Justine C. Allen snapped its rudder cable and rolled uncontrollably until the crew jury-rigged a steering cable. Waves tore off the pilot house of the New Haven Saucony on its run from Indiana to Muskegon. As the Henry Steinbrenner fought its way with a load of coal, a monstrous wave flooded the captain's cabin. Heavy seas blew out the pilot house windows of the huge Joseph Block. The storm popped thousands of rivets on the Thomas F. Cole, causing its hull to sag. A huge wave took out power on the self-unloader Sonola, and it blew ashore at Big Bay, Davock. The Canadian freighter Arthur Orr ran aground at Waugoshance Point. Waves broke the rudder cable on the self-unloader Canut, and it ran aground at Epithet. The package freighter Alfred H. Smith pitched violently in the Straits of Mackinac. The cargo of sardines and chocolate coagulated in a heap. The car ferry city of Sheboygan struggled across the Straits of Mackinac, and the automobiles on its deck were mangled beyond repair. Despite the ordeals on these many large freighters, not one single crew member lost his life. That fate was reserved only for those vessels caught off the shore of West Michigan, where the vortex of the storm did its worst damage. The geography of that area often generates rogue waves, but with wind gusts over 100 miles an hour, the waves were higher than sailors had ever seen. And by a random coincidence, 4 large freighters were all sailing between Big and Little Sable points as the sky turned inky black. At 8 o'clock that night, the lights from the city of Flint 32 appeared just outside the Ludington harbor. Captain Jens Vavang did his best to thread the needle into the Arrowhead breakwater, but the force of the winds pushed him north towards the beach. The Coast Guard and locals gathered on the beach to watch the seas pound the ship. But the waves were too high to attempt a rescue that night. Meanwhile, just 15 miles south, the Novodak faced its own struggles. Captain Stipe attempted to turn his ship into the wind to try to ride out the storm, but the force of the waves prevented that and pushed him dangerously close to shore. At 9:30 that night, the Novodak slammed into the sandbar at Little Sable Point. The ship lurched and settled by the stern, and then the lights flickered off. Soon, a monstrous wave washed the cook and his assistant overboard. The rest of the men hunkered down, not sure anyone on shore even knew of their plight. Somewhere nearby in the vortex of the storm, the William B. Davock struggled to keep afloat, and the Anna Minch fought its own battle. Overnight, the city of Flint 32 held its place near the beach. In the morning, the Ludington Coast Guard readied its Lyle gun to begin taking survivors off the wreck. One after another, they pulled 2 crew members to shore in the breeches buoy, but those men got doused in the icy water and arrived more dead than alive. Instead, the Coast Guard launched its pulling lifeboat. The seas were still running high, but they made it out to the stranded ship and began taking off the passengers and some of the crew. Everyone was shaken by the ordeal, but they survived without injury. Some of the crew remained on board to chip off ice and pump out the ship to get it ready for recovery. With the help of a wrecking tug from Chicago and the Pier Marquette 21, the Flint was towed into Ludington, little worse for wear. Concern for the safety of other sailors was raised when several bodies were spotted. Lettering on the life jackets revealed the fate of the missing Anna Minch and William B. Davock. Then an empty lifeboat from the Davock washed ashore. At 9:30 on Tuesday morning, a group of concerned citizens spotted the Novodak aground south of Little Sable Point. They saw someone waving a sheet out the porthole and realized there were survivors. Within a few hours, Coast Guardsmen from Ludington, Pentwater, Muskegon, and Grand Haven struggled to try to reach the beach with the Lyle gun, but they got bogged down by the sand and snow. The Coast Guard also discussed a possible rescue with its motor lifeboat at Pentwater, but decided the water was still too rough to make the 7-mile trip out to the stranded ship. Outraged, Pentwater commercial fisherman Clyde Cross and his crew offered to take the Coast Guard out to the wreck in their sturdy fishing tug, the Three Brothers II, but the Coast Guard also rejected that offer, calling it suicidal. Whoever was alive in the ship would have to suffer through another frightening night. Locals kept bonfires lit to let them know they had not been forgotten. On Wednesday, Clyde Cross took matters into his own hands just before the Coast Guard could attempt a rescue. He made it out to the Novodak and brought all 17 surviving crewmen to shore. After the storm, salvors determined that the Novodak could not be raised and stripped it of its valuable equipment. They left the hulk to decay in place. In South Haven, locals began to worry about the fishermen and the Coast Guard rescue team when they did not return after the storm calmed. Their worst fears were confirmed when debris from the Indian was found at Grand Haven, as well as the name board from the Richard H. The body of one fisherman, John Taylor from the Richard H., came ashore. His watch was stopped at 2:50, just when the storm struck South Haven. Good news came from Chicago. The Coast Guard rescue crew arrived worn out but safe after 24 hours fighting the storm. Several days later, fisherman Clyde Cross spotted the tip of a mast south of the Pentwater Channel. Divers soon discovered a shipwreck, the Anna Minch, but its stern was missing. The following spring, salvors discovered the stern a quarter-mile south of the bow. The fact that the wreck was in two pieces prompted the theory that the Minch sank as the result of a collision with the still missing William B. Davock. A search for the Davock was mounted, but the wreck was not found. The Minch and the Davock became forever linked by a grave in Ludington's Lakeview Cemetery, where 3 unidentified victims were buried. An estate historic marker was erected in Ludington in 1971. In 1972, 32 years after the Armistice Day Storm, shipwreck hunter John Steele found the wreck of the Davock upside down 7 miles south of the Anna Minch in 200 feet of water. He made one dive and reported that the hull was undamaged, disproving the theory it had collided with the Minch. No one else visited the wreck until the 75th anniversary of the storm approached. That year, our team, the Michigan Shipwreck Research Association set out from Pentwater to film the wrecks of the 3 ships lost in the Armistice Day Storm. The final resting place of the 2 sections of the Anna Minch is about a mile south of the Pentwater Channel. We anchored near the bow section first, in 35 feet of water. Visibility is generally bad at this site because it's so close to the Pentwater Channel. Both runoff from the inland Pentwater Lake and traffic from all the recreational vehicles stir up the water. Days after the Minch sank, its mast could be seen above water. In time, the Army Corps of Engineers dynamited the wreckage to reduce its height to give other boats safe clearance. That left the ship hardly recognizable. We can see a pair of bollards and the anchor windlass, which tells us that we're at the bow. There's one feature that stands out: the anchor chain passing through the hawse pipe once in the ship's forward hull. The chain disappears into the sand, and we believe that the anchor is deeply buried. There's the other set of bollards at the bow. Behind that, we only see the framing of the cargo hold. The deck is long gone. This is the larger of the 2 sections. It's about 290 feet long, almost the size of a football field. To examine the stern section, we'll have to surface and relocate the boat. We're coming down right on top of the engine. It's a triple expansion engine similar to the one on the Novodak, but this one is fully exposed. The Minch had 3 boilers located immediately forward of the engine. The roof of the engine room is long gone, exposing the equipment. The break occurred just forward of the boilers at the bulkhead that separated the engine room from the cargo hold, so this section is only about 90 feet long. That's the aft winch used for securing the dock lines. The wreck is covered by zebra and quagga mussels, and a lot of little goby fish congregate there. After the dive, we theorized how the Anna Minch split in half. As the storm pushed the Minch north toward shore, the captain anchored the ship near the channel, hoping to ride out the storm. He would have kept the engine running to counter strain on the anchors to keep the waves from pushing the ship toward shore. In water that shallow, a wave probably caused the heavy stern to hit bottom, fracturing the bulkhead wall just forward of the boilers. The still operating engine then propelled the stern forward until the onrush of water took both halves to the bottom. The Minch's stern might have looked something like the oil tanker Fort Dearborn that broke in 2 in a 1947 storm off Hawaii, though in that case the stern made it safely to port. Few Great Lakes ships have ever broken in 2. In 1966, the Daniel J. Morrell split up and sank, and so did the Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975. Next, we motored south 6 miles to the site of the Novodak off Silver Lake sand dunes. The landscape has changed little in 75 years, except now we hear the drone from the dune buggies. My newly certified teenage daughters, Sella and Taya, join me for the dive. Taya and I are coming down on the bow. Although the ice and waves have damaged the ship over the decades, the bow remains very intact. There are 3 pairs of bollards and a winch used to secure the ship at the dock, and a windlass used to haul up the anchors. Only the pilot house behind that equipment is gone. Now we're moving aft over the cargo deck. That's the base of the forward king post and another winch used to handle cargo and close the telescoping hatches. You can see these features in a photo taken after the storm. Now we're approaching the after end where the engine is located. The deck used to step up here to cover the engine, and you can see the base of the aft king post and another winch. The decking is gone now, so we can see the top of the triple expansion engine. Those 3 circles. It was about 10 feet tall, so most of it is buried. Now we're approaching the stern. The steering gear is located at the center of the image. This transferred movement of the ship's wheel to the rudder to steer the ship. Now we're at the stern deck where there are 2 more sets of bollards and another winch for securing the ship at the dock. After examining the whole length of the ship, we return to the bow where our boat is anchored.
Yeah.
My daughter Sella follows me up.
How was your dive?
Awesome!
It was pretty cool. After that dive, we set off for the William B. Davock, 4 miles west of the Novodak. My daughters would not be making that dive. The wreck is in 200 feet of water. As we near the site, the wreck appears on the bottom finder. Our team's technical divers Jeff Voss and Bob Underhill prepare for the dive. They will be breathing mixed gas, a special blend that allows them to keep a clear head at depth. There's Jeff going down. The hull is coming into view now. The downline is set right about in the middle of the hull. Jeff is heading towards the bow. This is an unusual sight to see. There are only a few shipwrecks in the Great Lakes that are completely overturned. He spots a little opening. That's actually the place where the raised forward deck comes down to meet the cargo deck. Peering inside, he can see the forwardmost hatch. The hatch cover clamps are still there, which means the crew had them properly secured. Moving forward, he sees two portholes. They're located on the port side of the ship. So much of the forward end is buried in the lake bottom. As he reaches the bow, he spots an anchor still secure in its pocket. That confirms the captain did not set the anchors like the Anna Minch captain did. Jeff rounds the bow and begins a long swim, 420 feet, to see what the stern might reveal. It's quite rare to see the underside of a freighter. It's shaped almost like a shoebox with hull plates riveted together over a steel framework. The stern is coming into view. The ship is buried even more deeply here. The cause of the sinking is immediately apparent looking at the rudder and the propeller. The rudder is swung back much further than it could normally rotate. That means its cable snapped, something that can happen in massive seas like during that storm. And one of the propeller blades is missing. The rudder must have hit the propeller and sheared off a blade. At that point, the ship was doomed. After 25 minutes on the bottom, Jeff heads back toward the line and to the surface to report his findings. After examining the wreck closely, we're able to understand what caused the massive freighter to sink. Like this amazing footage captured of an ocean-going freighter, once the rudder and propeller were broken, the wheelsman couldn't control the ship. The waves caused the ship to broach, capsize, fill with water. and then quickly sink. After the dives, we returned to Pentwater to share the video with Arnold Johnson, who lost his father, also named Arnold Johnson, who was an engineer on board the William B. Davock. His father's body was never found.
Here's my father and my brother-in-law. They ran a Shell gas station, but business was terrible, and so he had to go back sailing. But he was only on the ship about 2 weeks when it went down. I can remember the day he went back sailing. He came to that house right there, and he got his clothes and put them in a Model A Ford coupe. And I hung out on out there hollering, "Bye, Daddy," and that's the last I saw of him. But then that storm came. It was a bad storm.
I think from in the storm, my guess is that the rudder broke free, and then because right now it's rotated.
This rudder should be all the way out here.
You're right.
It should be
You're
out
right.
this way.
Should be the other
This
way.
way.
And there's the propellers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always heard the rumor that some of them had collided, but it's not true. You know? And a knock came on the door. My mother went to the door, and it was a policeman, and she started crying. And she said, then she came back inside, and she said, "We're going to your sister's house." And so we went there, and then we found out what happened.
Octogenarian Harold Mullen also lost his father, who worked side by side with Arnold Johnson as the Davock's second engineer.
Going back to that day, November 11th, there was a lot of changes made, you know. I was 10 years old. We were in school in Sault Ste. Marie, and they come and got us out of school. I knew, you know, I don't think the other kid did it, but I knew there was something bad wrong. And that's what happened. From there on, it just kind of hard to believe. Couldn't believe it, you know. Didn't believe it. Didn't want to believe it. And it took a long time to believe it, you know. And even after that, you know, I still didn't believe it when I was older. I always thought I'd meet him again on a job someplace. I figured he'd cut out or something. Something happened.
Harold Mullen had a chance to say a final goodbye to his dad at the 75th anniversary of the Armistice Day Storm, right over the site of the William B. Davock. Tragically, the Armistice Day Storm took the lives of 64 sailors.
Janetis and C.J. Flint. May they rest in peace.
The Armistice Day Storm is considered Lake Michigan's deadliest storm due to its ferocity and duration, but more significantly, due to its unexpectedness. The loss of so many people brought about significant changes in national weather prediction that have saved countless lives in the coming years. The Weather Bureau moved from 12-hour days, 6 days a week, to round-the-clock operations 7 days a week to better monitor conditions and provide forecasts. And rather than only one regional office in Chicago, the Weather Bureau established offices all over the Midwest. Those changes have assured that the citizens and sailors in the Great Lakes region will never be caught so off guard again. Since then, no Midwest weather event has affected more ships or claimed as many lives as the Armistice Day Storm of 1940.